Hi everyone, and welcome to the Frisk Centre for Autism and Innovation. I'm Jessica Shonett-Stasek. I'm the Programme Manager for the Frisk Centre, and I'm going to moderate today's panel. So a quick bit of housekeeping. As always, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the Frisk Centre YouTube later today or early tomorrow, depending on my schedule. And I'll put the link right now in the chat to the YouTube, to anyone you like. It's just there. So today we're going to be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace, our favorite topic, in terms of workplace training, transitions, and virtual reality and mixed reality technology as a support for that. We have some great panelists, so I'm going to go around and introduce them before we get started. I was going to do this I'm going to do this in the order I wrote it in. The first is Vijay Ravindran. Did I say that right, Vijay? Ravindran, okay. Who's the founder and CEO of Floreo, which is a virtual reality company specializing in virtual therapy and skills training. Vijay started his career as an engineer at Amazon when it was still purely a retail market, which seems like so long ago now. He then chose to move into impact-oriented leadership opportunities and has worked on such projects as building voter technology, which sounds awesome. He was inspired to start Floreo after his experience as a father of an autistic son. Then we have Jade Pridgeon, self-directed supervisor and lead family consultant at Changing the Lives of Children with Autism, a Maryland-based service provider offering children and young adults personalized family counseling, intensive individual support services, respite care, adult life planning, self-directed services, and therapeutic integrations. So really everything. Has a dual undergraduate degree in elementary special education from Washington Adventist University and a master's in curriculum and instruction from Walden University. Her previous work includes being a para-educator and special education classroom teacher. She's been honored with the Outstanding Educator Award by the Montgomery County Council and serves as liaison. Next up, we have Harold Sloves, an innovation consultant for intellectual and development disability systems and networks. That's a mouthful, that job title. His expertise includes bringing innovation to people in the market, marketing and new business development, managing and leadership of complex human service organizations, developmental and intellectual disabilities, and adult and adolescent mental health. And finally, everyone's so accomplished, so many words. Finally, we have Kayvon Stassen, who is the founder and director of the Frisk Centre for Autism and Innovation. Kayvon is a professor of astronomy at Vanderbilt University and holds many other titles and honors, this year alone being elected to the National Science Board by President, being elected as a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And like Vijay, he entered the world of neurodiversity through his son. So let's get going. I wrote some questions for you guys today, and I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna kind of direct them at each of you, and then we'll kind of have a discussion around them. And feel free to take it. I'm just here to facilitate. I will be mostly quiet. So if we could start with Vijay. I would love to discuss your thoughts on workplace training and how new assistive technologies, especially VR technologies, provide support in the workplace, and particularly to those who are neurodivergent. So can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. It's great to see everyone here and talk to everyone. So, virtual reality is a powerful medium that enables immersive experiences in environments that are different than the home you're in, the settings you're in, which creates an ultimate practice and training environment for situations of life, including the workplace. And so what we're seeing is opportunities using our system, Floreo, but also other virtual reality initiatives, including those inside of the Frisk Center itself, is that we can think about several of the factors that are often challenges for neurodivergence as they enter the workplace. I think of it in three different areas that for many jobs, there are the skills you need to actually perform the job. So think of the sequence of, filling the soda machine at a movie theater if you worked there, or working in the stock room and trying to think about how to organize what gets placed in the grocery store, all the way up to other types of jobs, to how to interact with your colleagues, how to interact with your supervisor, how to maintain the type of collegial relationships that lead to advancement in a job, that leads to further job satisfaction that goes beyond actually doing the actual job. I think many of us who've been in the workplace know that it's often the relationships with colleagues and the support you get that can help motivate you and boost you in a job, even if certain aspects of a job are mundane or not satisfying. The third aspect is the practicalities outside of the job that can affect your job performance. Your ability to maintain a home, to use public transportation or drive yourself to a job site. All of those are factors where there's opportunities to use assistive technologies like VR to help bolster the skill sets of the neurodivergent individual to then lead to workplace success. So what we do at Floreo is we create lessons across all of those different areas. We have lessons on working in the movie theater, working in the stockroom of the grocery store. We have lessons on how to make small talk with other people, how to handle difficult situations, including, a little outside of the workplace setting, bullying scenarios, or inviting a friend to sit next to you at the lunch table. And we have lessons which were sponsored by the Tennessee Department of IDD, where we've also built capabilities around using the public bus system to get you to your job site. And so all of those, I think, create sort of that troika of skills that lead to someone being successful.
And just to piggyback off of VJ, when you think about transitioning from adolescence to adulthood, for anyone, this is a huge adjustment in life. For people on the spectrum that may have executive functioning needs, social deficits, this transition is a bit more challenging. People in the world are not as accommodating and as gracious as we would hope they would be. However, Floreo is bridging that gap with their workplace readiness lessons. These lessons provide my older transitioning participants with a replicated kind of virtual environment, social skills practice, job readiness practice, and just an overall comfortable space to explore skills in the community that most of them will embark on in their vocational journey. Time management, organization, community awareness, and working with others are just some of the amazing features that participants experience via Floreo in various settings.
Jade, I'm really glad you mentioned that because one of the still unfulfilled opportunities for Floreo is exactly with students who are in transition and who are hopefully not going to enter a waiver environment. So this is a tremendous possibility for virtual reality, especially with kids who are in that gaming world already, to begin that process, whether it's public transportation. And I would really underscore the social skill aspect of what virtual reality can offer. There's so many possible jobs out there with different kinds of skill needs. But the notion of working on those social skills and the unexpected that happens in life and on the bus or at work, I think is key. But what a tremendous opportunity to offer this in a proactive, preemptive way for students in transition as a way to practically, and I don't mean to sound too dramatic, but change the trajectory and prevent a pattern of dependence on others, which frankly, that's life in the waiver.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Yvonne, do you have any thoughts?
Gosh, I feel like the work that Vijay and his team at Floreo Tech are doing in this area is so cutting edge and kind of where where we need to be headed. That we've kind of covered that one pretty well already. I think you have a question coming up about sort of future or advanced technological developments that tie into this. So maybe I'll wait for that one.
I can go right to that one now. I will mention, oh, someone's asked a question in the chat, and I'm going to put these in as we go. I want to just mention to our attendees, I'm really sorry. I know that my internet's breaking up a little bit. That's just because we've had some earthquaking, really funny, but hopefully you can hear our panelists fine, but let me know if we have any problems in the chat and I can try and fix it. So there's a question here for Jade in the chat. How does VR help in a transitional environment? Does it translate into real life?
It absolutely translates into real life. And Jess, I think this is a part of my question that you had sent me prior to the panel. So I taught in the public school system in special education for about 15 years before becoming a resource teacher for special education. There are various opportunities for on-site workplace experience in the community. However, those experiences in the community are limited to what's available at the time. They're not necessarily interest-based, and or there's just not enough time for students to really develop skills associated with specific jobs. Assistive technology has proven to be so beneficial for many people on the spectrum, not on the spectrum. The benefits of assistive technology have vastly transformed the way people with disabilities communicate and see the world. As we all know, children are ever changing from new trends, styles of learning, and more access to technology. Moving towards VR just seems naturally and essential to incorporate into the classroom. And especially for my transitioning middle schoolers and particularly my transitioning high schoolers. As a resource teacher, I would devote time specifically for workplace training for my transitioning middle and high schoolers. Essentially, that would look like me either pushing into specials classes or allocating and devoting time at the end of resource classes or doing homeroom to kind of set goals and work on the program. I've used various methods for teaching, like role-playing, assistive technology, and virtual platforms to hone in on skills needed for workplace training. I work with various companies and piloted different robots and other virtual platforms to promote and teach social skills, organization, and collaboration. The Floreo VR program and platform is a more advanced platform that provides a more realistic, targeted, and controlled environment in which students can work on targeted goals and transfer those goals into the community. So you're actually seeing what they're working on virtually in the community. I've had a couple of my participants want to work at the grocery store. We've practiced lessons that worked on collaborative learning and collaborative communicating with people in the grocery store and working on stacking cans and things of that nature in the virtual platform. And we've actually went to a grocery store and those skills are definitely seen. Parents have seen them. Floreo provides a lot of data-based instruction that I can go back to and I can pull data to show my participants, to show my parents, like this is what we've been working on and now you actually see it in reality.
Jade, I'm so glad you mentioned data. You know, as a guy who gets lost sometimes driving, you know, there's an old saying, I don't know where we're going, but we're making good time. My point in sharing that silly story is simply that in today's world, and if we talk about the waiver world, the availability of real data to say we're getting somewhere, to validate and confirm the perception of progress is critical. And it's a step toward, you know, having evidence, an evidence-based approach through VR that you have the data. And I would just say in general, from my time in the field, that continues to be a glaring need. Yeah. to have the data and evidence to say this is working. Sure, it may feel good, and that's fine, but in a world of challenges over dollars for stuff, there needs to be a way to identify those things that are really working.
Yeah, and I think this is a great opportunity to tout the work of the Frist Center, because I think in many ways, a lot of what we have done has been on the shoulders of work at the Frist Center, along with, there's a few other innovators in the country that stand out when it comes to workplace, like the Dan Marino Foundation. But the Frist Center's research around things like job interview skills, which was featured in 60 Minutes, and driving, those are critical because they're adding a research base that commercial companies like Floreo can build on top of. We still have to do our own research as well, but we're not starting from scratch. We're able to see what is happening and what's already providing evidence.
Maybe I'll jump in there. Thank you, Vijay, for saying that. One specific area of research that I know Vijay and the team at Floreo are well aware of, but that may be worth sharing with others here is we're beginning to understand more and more what sometimes people now refer to as the double empathy problem, right? Which is that in particular, when it comes to the world of work, I mean, almost any job, almost any occupation involves some amount, in some cases a lot, of interaction and communication with coworkers, with supervisors, with others, right? There's some amount of communication and interpersonal interaction that is just required as a part of just about any job or occupation. And practicing how to effectively communicate in the context of a job, in the context of a set of real-world occupational tasks, is something that our research is showing is really, really important. In other words, communicating and interacting interpersonally on the job is not something that you can learn just kind of in the abstract, especially for neurodivergent people. Providing real-world concrete opportunities for practice is really essential. And lastly, coming back to my initial point about double empathy, as workplaces become ever more inclusive, including neuro-inclusive, it is equally as important for neurotypical coworkers to learn how to effectively communicate and interact with their neurodivergent peers. And so one of the things that we're working on actively with the Floreo team is integrating into the Floreo platform virtual reality environments, work environments that are specifically structured to allow both the neurodivergent learner and a neurotypical peer or coach to learn from and with one another how to effectively interact and communicate mutually.
All excellent, guys. It's great to hear like really deeply what's going on at Floreo and how it impacts so many levels. It's really cool.
Yes, I see that there's a question. Maybe you were just about to say there's a question.
I was just about to say it.
That feels like it's a good segue. Yeah, go ahead.
It is a really good segue, so I was going to go for it. So Raymond asks, how does Floreo balance the neurodiverse / individual intersection with characteristic environmental adjustments for workplace transitions so that ND individuals retain their sense of individuality while receiving the help they need? What a great question. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think I would probably also widen it to, how can VR technology help in this space? Because, in many ways, we're just getting started. I think the first thing that's been really important to us is that the lessons we build in Floreo are positive and respectful to the neurodivergent individual, and that they're seen in a constructive light, and that the organizations we work with are the kind that work in a manner that lifts the neurodivergent individual up and does not try to create some of the things that end up de-individualizing them, to use some of Raymond's language. It's very important. And so, VR is a very supportive environment in that sense, but also how you design the content and how you try to create engagement and motivation is very important as well. We're starting to venture into also
thinking about the use of VR as a means for the neurotypicals to be able to be more accommodating and understand how often very simple adjustments in their environments can mean the world to a neurodivergent who's entering that space and being able to be successful. One of the areas where we're doing that is through a partnership with Nicholas Children's Hospital. And we're doing that in a medical environment. But I think this is an area where there's quite a bit of room for innovation amongst a number of virtual reality companies as well as institutions to start looking into. And that VR, because of its immersive qualities, can both create environments where richer interactions between neurodivergents and neurotypicals can happen, potentially in a group setting using VR that allows for collaborations. The commercial MetaQuest headsets have party functions that are built into games. They can allow for skill building, for camaraderie, for engagement. Often playing 9 holes of mini golf in virtual reality with somebody else where you're able to talk to each other is actually an amazing way to build bonding, and for a neurodivergent could be a great gateway point to be able to meet someone and build comfort before they have that first or deeper in-person interactions later. I think also when you think of trainings for people, whether it's in law enforcement or the medical world, teachers or therapists, that the opportunities to use VR as a means of practicing some of the challenges they might face and what are respectful techniques to then use in those situations, as well as the adjustments they can make to an environment, can be really powerful. And so, we are working on some of that, but I think there's quite a big ocean of opportunity for others to as well step in, and we hope to see that.
That's great. VJ, any thoughts on this? Or did VJ just smash that, didn't he? That was a great answer.
He just smashed it out of the park.
Well, what VJ also did is just show, just the breadth of possibilities.
That's right.
The breadth of possibilities with VR, and sometimes for me, and I'm a newbie in the VR world, to be honest, I met Vijay when he was talking about the transportation VR and that kind of thing. I was with the state at the time, and that's how I got to know Floreo. But as I, started to learn more and more, what was at times overwhelming with the possibilities.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off of that, Harold, just before this panel started, I was talking with VJ and the rest of the panel about how I kind of interact with my liaison, Heather, who is absolutely amazing. And there's just endless possibilities that this virtual reality world and simulations that we can set up. And I'm glad that VJ and the Floreo team is moving more to a more customized kind of experience and a more customized kind of interactions with the learner and the coach as well.
Yeah, and this is actually a good opportunity, thank you, to mention another technology on the horizon that I think the opportunities to interplay with what we're doing are tremendous, which is AI, and how AI can potentially be used to generate new art in the virtual reality world, which could then be more heavily customized to the individual. And then, we can see with chatbots like ChatGPT how technologies like that can potentially power characters to be more conversive and more flexible and fungible to the responses of the individuals. And I think just to tout again some of the fascinating work of the Frist Center, the job interview trainings built in the Frist Center use voice recognition. They use detection of stress in the voice, and then they use that to tailor responses from characters. And so you can see where the future is going, where the intersection of an immersive environment that can teach better than teaching in a two-dimensional flat manner is powerful. But then if you throw on top of that highly personalized environments that are actually tailored to the situation the individual's in, their school, their home, their community, urban, rural, et cetera. But then also layered on top of that, that the characters are more intelligent, are more engaging, that less supervision is needed from other people. And especially when we're talking about adults don't want supervision necessarily. They want to be able to potentially receive these trainings in a self-directed manner without necessarily having to expose the challenge that might have to those around them, but instead be able to self-serve and grow without necessarily having to show all the work they're doing. I mean, I think when I think of my son, he works so hard, and 90% of the work he's doing behind the scenes to allow himself to be successful, where most people wouldn't even appreciate all the work that's going into it. And I think that's true across the board with neurodivergent individuals having to work in a neurotypical environment. And so the more we can not only create technology that is helpful, but also is delivered in a manner where it has the right respect and privacy that the individual wants to be able to receive it, I think is going to be really important. And I think technologies like AI can potentially help bridge the gap that's there.
Vijay, with respect to AI, it seems to me that the challenge of customization is also scalability, right? And so the AI is an engine, if you will, who can help you overcome what I perceive as a challenge. And if I'm wrong, please tell me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's many different forms that artificial intelligence is taking. So I think what is in the du jour right now is ChatGPT style chatbot, conversive text AI. That technology can obviously be used to power characters to be more conversive, and if the individual takes the conversation a certain way or has a certain question, to potentially have answers delivered. Now, what are the quality of those answers? Do they live within a set of guardrails that we're comfortable with? Those are some of the upcoming challenges to how that technology evolves and is scaled, but that can definitely help. I think the other area though, and this, there's a real cost for a company like Floreo and anyone else developing virtual reality content in developing the 3D art, developing the 3D characters, and those costs, if they can be taken away through 3D art being generated through artificial intelligence, and that potentially the end user like Jade is able to say, well, I'm in suburban Maryland. The socio-demographic profiles of the people that my clients are going to be interacting with look like this, or the job site looks like that. The customers look like this, or going to act like that. And that if there's potentially ways to tailor how those characters are modeled, what their personalities are like, what those environments are modeled after, and to do that in a individualized way without incurring immense costs because of human content development, that's really powerful for this community.
That is so cool.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. There's a load of more questions in the chat. I'm gonna work down them because there's actually one here that I think it was something that I think about. What about sensory sensitive individuals? Is VR an option? I remember the first time I put on an Oculus Rift about 10 years ago. I was actually working for them and I did some original I was playing the original games. I felt so sick. I got immediately motion sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, I
know, but has anyone got any?
I'm happy to take a first crack at answering how I've thought about that at the beginning, but I'm sure, Kayvon and Jade have so much experience as well that I'm really curious to hear what they say. When I was starting the company back in 2016, the first thing anyone who was around neurodivergent kids would be like, I don't think my kids will wear the headset. That was almost a universal answer. And so it was the first area. I didn't have this problem because my child is a sensory seeker. And so, but I think it was something I was very cognizant of. What we found is that the simplified VR environments can be actually very welcoming because they're less noisy and distracting compared to the real world or compared to hyper realistic animation. The other thing is that it's really important to develop the scenes to be in a manner that is sensitive to motion. So we probably really limit locomotion in the scenes so that we don't do roller coasters in Floreo. You know, we don't have things that are moving really fast, and that's part of the reason why. But more than anything else, the model of having a coach that is there with you when you're in VR creates a support structure so that there's more confidence trying it. And then there's some very simple techniques that we have taught customers. You know, sometimes it's as simple as a hand on the shoulder, or the ability to see first through the coaching app on the iPad before putting the headset on and knowing what's happening on the other side. You know, very simple things. And because the coach is vocally engaged with the learner while the learner is in VR, there's not a complete separation. So as a result, in our research, if you look at like our NIH funded randomized controlled trial with 150 kids, that we see participation rates well into the 90 percentiles, past in the 95%. Our first study had a 98% completion rate in lessons. This was in kids ages 6 to 18. So we've seen really high participation rates, but only because I think the combination of the content design and the supervising adult model giving that extra layer of security, I think has helped. And now I think in this population with more adults, there's more acceptance of the technology from the get-go. Last thing I'd say is that one of our customers is Bancroft in the Mid-Atlantic, which works with a highly impacted population. They're running residency groups, and they just presented a study at a recent behavioral analyst conference where they used Floreo as a way of A/B testing the choice of 2D video to learn versus VR, and they had an 80% preference rate in VR. So I think once individuals learn that it's a safe place to be, and that and in younger kids especially, that there's screens in them, and that the screens end up being something they're seeking, that they end up being engaged. But I'd love to hear Kayvon and Jade's experiences, since they've worked with a lot of adults, over either recently in Jade's case or over several years in Kayvon's.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. And I mean, this is something, Vijay, that you and I have talked about a lot over the years, and indeed, I would say I've come to learn from you and from the many, your company's experience working with many individuals over the years. I've come to learn from you basically what you just said, that there is in fact a larger tolerance for the VR headsets in a larger part of the population than I would have guessed, again, just based on my own experience and that of my own son. What I would add, though, is that I think it depends a little bit on the nature of the sort of the tasks and the duration, right? So, for example, one of the technologies that we're developing at the Frisch Center is a virtual reality-based driving instruction system, so that autistic adults can learn how to drive a vehicle, have independence in transportation, reliably get to work. And that's a pretty kind of intense sort of set of scenarios, because we're trying to realistically prepare people for the real world of driving a car in all different kinds of situations. So it's relatively intense, and the sessions are relatively long in duration, an hour, 90 minutes, that kind of thing. And we've developed that system with both a wearable headset option and with a tabletop, monitor kind of option. And in that situation, overwhelmingly, participants prefer the tabletop monitor option. So, so again, it may just have to do with sort of the nature of the task and what people are learning in the virtual environment, how long the sessions are, the intensity of the tasks, things like that.
Yeah, there's still a lot to learn, sounds like, on that front.
Yeah.
There's still a lot to learn, but I think we're moving forward in the correct direction. I know for most of my participants, they're not sensory avoidant. They don't have any issues wearing the headset. I've had a couple of participants where I had to actually put the headset on and kind of model and kind of give them my coach's screen so they will feel comfortable in just knowing what I will be seeing and they will be seeing in that virtual world, and kind of starting small and getting them to wear the headset for like 5 minutes and then taking it off, and then gradually increasing that time over, the duration of our sessions. But I really haven't had any, because I am working with primarily older participants that are aging out of waiver services and moving to self-directed services. So I really haven't had any resistance to the VR system or the headset.
That was actually my very first worry back when I was with the Tennessee Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, that the headset would prompt an adverse reaction among participants. And this is when we were just really at the beginning, and really it was a misplaced worry among adults in our system. We were more worried about it than anybody else. So that was our brief experience with it.
I think the bigger risk is boring content, or content that the individuals don't want to use. Like, I think it falls back on, I think, many of the challenges that if you were creating games or entertainment you would have. I mean, obviously this is different because you have a skill building purpose to it, but you still have to be engaging and you have to still be respectful of the time that people are spending in it.
It's good to know that VR has moved on since the first time I put it on. So there's a question here that might just be able to be answered in the chat with a link. Someone said, I would like to see how this program works. Can you show me some kind of video or something, please? Is there like a link that we could send?
Absolutely. We do have some examples on the floreovr.com site of the system in action. And I don't know if we're doing show notes or follow-ups, but we're happy to also provide Jess with some links. And then I would also encourage, if you haven't seen the 60-minute clip for the Frist Center for Innovation as well, it's also a great demonstration of the VR technology that they have on their site. And there are many similar concepts here, so those can be shared.
Yeah, good idea. Let's share those links afterward.
I will put them in the show notes of the YouTube and an email. Another one, let's choose another one. What would you say are the biggest challenges for young adults who are transitioning into the workforce? And maybe we can frame that around.
Yeah, I think Harold, that'd be a great question for Harold. He's studied the space so much.
You're on mute, Carol.
Yeah, I just saw that. I got a big sign in front of me that said you were muted. So the question was, what are the challenges? Well, I mean, frankly, one of the real challenges is breaking through some of the stereotypical types of jobs that our field has inadvertently defined for people. I mean, where do you want to work? And look, I am not ever going to demean any kind of work that people want to pursue, but there's more to a first job than fast food or carts, in the grocery store. I mean, I get it. That's just been a tradition for how things began in our field, but we need to break through it. So I think so. The challenge is really is knowing not just what's possible, but what do I like? What do I like and what's out there? So by virtue of VR is certainly one modality. There are a number of software applications that can help guide somebody to figure out, what am I good at? What do I like? I mean, some of it is are videos of different types of jobs that people can, look at. But the point is, making the leap from home and family to work requires guidance, and VR is one of the tools that can help people experience different jobs. And then, what that does is it creates efficiencies. I mean, when you hit the pavement, it's always good to have a map and a plan rather than driving around looking at, where the help wanted signs, which of course are somewhat obsolete. But the challenge is getting started. And frankly, one of the other issues that we talked about are, I mean, there are skills for jobs, but again, I go back to my point of view that VR to help people work through these social elements of work that we've talked about a good bit today is absolutely vital. And breaking, entering that social world at work and transportation in a safe way and a way that you can learn, I think is a vital first step. I mean, it creates comfort. I mean, it just creates comfort before you actually step foot in the door. And I think that's a really big deal. I think that's a really big deal that, I mean, frankly, that's often one of the things that gets people fired, whether you're neurodiverse or not. And that is social skills or absence thereof, or coping skills and absence thereof. So I don't think I can emphasize that enough, and how VR can help overcome those issues. I hope I answered. If not, somebody help. Somebody help me.
To piggyback off of Harold, what VR provides is that repeated practice that most of our individuals with disabilities need. They need the environment, yes, the safe environment, but they need the repeated practice to access and to make mistakes and to, figure out what works and what doesn't work in, that in-person environment. So that the VR system gives them that safe place to practice over and over and over again, as much as their heart desires.
And Harold mentioned transportation too. I was glad to hear you say that, because, even with at the First Center, we work closely with a number of employers who are, looking very seriously and actively at hiring for neurodiversity, including, for example, the Precisionists Incorporated, who hire only neurodivergent people. And, so here you have a company that they've developed alternative assessment, alternative methods of assessment, of hiring, of onboarding, of on-the-job training, all this stuff to be able to effectively hire neurodivergent people and provide on-the-job supports for success. And we asked them, what do they still see as the number one challenge? The number one challenge is independence of transportation, because people still need to be able to get to work and keep the job.
And afford to get there too. So just a very brief divergence. There is a movement where employers are going to look at transportation as a benefit. So just something to keep our eye on. I don't know how much traction it's getting, but that's one solution, Kevon. If you really focus on a diverse workforce, that's another way to achieve that.
Yeah, those were all really good answers. I think it's a really good example of boats. Everyone benefits from those kinds of things, that kind of support. Speaking of cost, there's a question here that asks, VR technology is still pretty expensive for many families. How can we get this tech into the hands of underserved and under-resourced families and communities?
That's a great question. And it's been, I think when I'm talking to people about what it's like to build the company, it must have been so hard to build a system that has this content that is showing research results. In many ways, that's been easier than in our healthcare system, figuring out how new technologies that can benefit, individuals can actually get paid for in a manner where the family themselves are not footing the bill. And so, you know, that's something we've worked really hard on. You know, we have Medicaid waiver approvals in several states, including through AmeriGroup in Tennessee, and in New York, in Wisconsin. But our primary effort has been in working through providers, whether they're in the job transitional space or in the more traditional behavioral therapy space for younger kids. The main impetus of that, and this is going to get into a very geeky place for many of you, is we're the first VR company with a CPT-3 billing code that qualified healthcare providers can add to the super bill that actually allows them to provide a retail price for their expense of leveraging VR in their service. And so that code, in conjunction with eligible codes such as therapy codes used by speech therapists, occupational therapists, PTs, ABA, psychotherapists, is a first step in putting the use of VR in front of insurance so that in-network reimbursement rates could potentially be established. And it's a long road. It won't happen instantaneously. It'll happen brick by brick initially. And then in parallel to that, you know, we, Floreo, have a responsibility of doing the types of research that eventually leads to the regulatory approvals with bodies like FDA to then open up the more broad reimbursement pathways. But reimbursement, ultimately, what should happen is that you know, we should get to a point where there's demonstrable evidence that is accepted by insurance, both Medicaid, you know, jobs programs like Tennessee ECF Choices, which, you know, we're working on through the IDD in Tennessee, and commercial insurance, and that in turn creates the right incentive structures for the technology to then be leveraged wherever possible. You know, right now, the reality of the environment right now is that if a provider wants to use our technology, they're paying for it as an infrastructure cost. And so they are making the decision they want to do that. But you can't, in our American healthcare system, you can't count on the altruism of providers to lead to the best outcome for everyone who needs it. You have to create the right economic incentive structures as well long-term. That's just a fact of how the world works. And so, you know, we're trying to do everything we can. And luckily we have great investors who have given us the type of capital to do the types of research we need to do to try to obtain the types of regulatory approvals that will eventually lead to a day where, whether it's a special education teacher, a jobs coach working through a government program, or a therapist, that they can make a professional decision that this makes sense, and then be able to use it without thinking about the economic cost of it. And that similarly, an individual or a family could potentially access self-directed dollars or other types of individualized help to have access to this, so that, because it's, I mean, societally, it makes total sense. We're, you know, at a 80 to 90% underemployment rate amongst neurodivergents in the workspace. We're literally leaving tens of billions of dollars of economic productivity on the table as a society right now, when there's staffing shortages galore in a number of industries, because we haven't provided the types of tools and access that could allow us to fill that gap. So eventually everyone should realize that it's in everyone's interest. We have to do our part to get there.
Congratulations. I think we have to acknowledge, I hope you don't mind, Jess, if we take 30 seconds to acknowledge just what an achievement it is that Vijay and the Floreo team cracked the code of basically in medical insurance billing for access to these kinds of tools. And I'll just add, you know, sometimes I get asked the question, because we work with, at the Frist Center, we work with and partner with a number of companies, you know, for-profit companies, like Floreo Tech, like the Precisionists, and a number of others. Sometimes I get asked, you know, like, what are sort of the what's sort of the ethical considerations of working with a for-profit company. And I think this is a perfect example of why it's important to include the for-profit efforts with all the different kinds of partners who are trying to make headway. Because what Floreo Tech accomplished with this is something that I would argue only a partner like Floreo could achieve. And what it has unlocked is access for lots of people who would not otherwise be able to have access to these kinds of tools.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Being able to unlock the American healthcare system is a real skill.
As I've said, we've laid some important piping. There's still a lot more to do to get the whole thing flowing with water, but the code is a really important first step. And I think the other thing that I think folks should feel good about is that we have some large healthcare providers now who are on our side, making the case directly to payers that this should be covered, showing the data they have internally of what a difference it makes. And so I think also, I think there's an appetite to do this as a team and as a group. It's not one company's effort. It's a community's effort to raise the bar on what the ceiling is for every neurodivergent individual.
Yes, if I may, and we have 4 minutes left.
Yes, we do.
Well, I'm going to anticipate, but also what I'd like to do more than anything is sort of dovetail with what has been said by Kevin and Vijay, and that is access, because fundamentally, we talk about the market is larger than the market really knows. When I talk about this stuff in front of people at conferences, they just gravitate toward me afterward and want to know more and more and more. So my point is that I believe we, and each of us in our own different way, really need to think about an education strategy and campaign. And I know that might sound a little bit grandiose, but in my, I went through this with, other technologies, enabling technologies getting started. And I will say this, and I mean it, education is never ending. It just doesn't end. And educating families, the market, however you wish to define it, is an ongoing strategy. People just don't know what's out there, and I continue to discover that. And secondly, even more so, people think about virtual reality, not all the time, but many times, as something that's way out here. This is Star Trek stuff, but it's not. It is more conventional than people realize. Corporations have been using VR for training employees for how long? So I think that is the other big issue that maybe gets in the way of people grabbing onto this. And that is, it is not, we have to stop thinking about it as exotic or novel or unique, that kind of thing. It is a mainstream opportunity for people, but it's not going to get there unless we, each of us, start campaigning and educating about that. And that's my editorial opinion of the day. I hope that made sense.
Guys, we have 1 minute, and I know some people have hard stops at 4 here, Eastern. So I'm just going to close it out. We did have some questions left over, but I'll make sure they're in the show notes and we answer them. And I'll make sure that is everyone happy with me leaving contact details?
Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Absolutely, please do.
I know there was one question about the usefulness of things like the Floreo tools for nonverbal individuals. Vijay, could you speak to that for just 15 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. many of the Floreo lessons, and I think and virtual reality technology writ large, can be beneficial for nonverbal individuals. The ability to practice life scenarios, social situations applies equally, and it really comes down to the lesson design and whether it can incorporate a nonverbal individual being able to navigate the lessons. And so, we actually organize our catalog so that you can filter to someone who's nonverbal to understand what's potentially applicable. I wouldn't say that we have an expansive array on the adult side, but you can imagine things like learning how to go to the bus stop, read the map, flag the bus, and get on the right bus. Those things can be accomplished without speaking. And I think the area where it's still a little awkward and there's opportunities to create more innovation is around how to incorporate the use of AAC devices into the VR experience. And I'm very excited about the Apple Vision Pro in that regard as well, because I do find the VR hand controllers to be pretty complicated to use. We don't use those in our current system for that reason. And the Apple Vision Pro, which is the new virtual reality headset coming out next year, incorporates hand gestures only. And I think there are going to be opportunities for more intuitive ways and potentially ways to integrate the types of interfaces non-speaking individuals are used to in AAC devices into the VR environment. So imagine you're looking at an environment, but you have an overlay of the types of things that you would be tapping on an AAC application available, and you can just tap and have it register in that virtual headset. Those types of capabilities are going to help a ton as well, make things more accessible.
Thanks, Vijay. I thought that was important. Thank you, Jess, for wrapping us up.
You're okay. And thank you, Vijay. Apple Vision, I'm so excited about. I'm such a nerd with this stuff. I watched the ad like 3 times. Thank you so much, everyone, for this. It's been great, and some great questions from the attendees. I will reach out to everyone soon. Thank you so much, guys, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jess, for moderating.